Hello everyone, and welcome back to our new series, Comparing History. In it, we're going to be putting legends of basketball against each other in a mirror and see where those comparisons take us. Are we trying to debate the age-old GOAT question? Not necessarily. This is more of a discussion between us on just the overall legend each guy has created for themselves. The pantheon of NBA history is a huge one. It shouldn't just be boiled down to a definitive, this guy is 100% better than the other. So with that being said, let's get into our next duo, Allen Iverson and Steve Nash. Allen Iverson has been widely regarded as the best pound-for-pound superstar, because at just scratching the 6-foot mark while weighing in at 165 pounds, this guy put on an offensive masterclass in a league of giants. The quick-footed shooting guard finished his career with averages of 27 points, 4 rebounds, and 6 assists. After a single season at Georgetown, Iverson was the first overall pick in 1996. He was starting his career by walking into a Philadelphia team that lacked any sort of real relevancy. They had a young, promising scorer in Jerry Stackhouse, but they were looking for their next star player to vault them back to contention. All nickname puns intended, AI was the answer. A quick aside, did you guys know a family friend of Iverson sued him over the answer nickname? The friend claimed that he was the one that gave him the nickname, and so he should be compensated. Eventually, they reached an agreement on a payout based on the money the nickname earned him. There's a wild story I bet you had never heard of. Another nickname he apparently was Bubba Chuck, which I don't think anyone will be hustling to claim ownership of. Bubba Chuck spent 9 seasons with the 76ers. During that time, he exploded into superstardom, both on and off the court. On the court, he carried his team as far as the finals in 2001. And when I say carried, I mean carried. Philly's top 3 leading shot takers were Iverson, Aaron McKie, and Theo Ratliff. Their shot attempts averaged ranked as such. Theo Ratliff was 3rd with 9.1 shots a game, Aaron McKie 9.4, Allen Bubba Chuck Iverson 25.5 times per game. That was 32% of the entire team's shot attempts. Opponents understood that there was basically a 1 in 3 chance AI was going for the bucket. But the even crazier part was, nobody could stop the guy. The same year Philadelphia made it to the finals was also the one Iverson would win his lone MVP award. The dude averaged 31 points a game. In the year 2000, mind you. Basketball over 2 decades ago was not like what it is today. Superstars weren't scoring 30 basically every night. The next closest man to him at that point was his former teammate Jerry Stackhouse, who got shipped to Detroit to let AI take the reins of the franchise. On the other side of the 1996 draft was the 15th overall pick, Steve Nash. Nash was a through-and-through point guard, the floor general on any court he stepped onto. Nash was born in South Africa, but grew up north in British Columbia. Now, although that's not exactly the typical destination you think of when you think NBA players, Nash was a sleeper in the midst of giants. He had a bit of height and weight over Iverson, sure, standing at 6'3" and 195 pounds. The first overall pick in this draft was probably the only man Steve could bully down low. Otherwise, Nash was developing himself into a quick-twitch player in both mind and body. His 4 years at the University of Santa Clara allowed him to mature and study the game away from the immediate spotlight. Nash's career averages were 14 points, 3 rebounds, and 8.5 assists. That box score looks a little underwhelming, if I'm going to be honest. These are the career averages of a 2-time MVP. If you're thinking that too, I get it. But here's 2 things you need to understand about Steve Nash's legacy. Number 1 is Steve was a bit of a slow burn. He was drafted to the Suns, but would only average 6 points and 3 assists a game in those 2 years. He was barely even scratching 20 minutes a game on that team. The Suns already had elite facilitators in Jason Kidd and Kevin Johnson. This wasn't some gutted team like Iverson walked into. This was a team trying to make deep playoff runs. And even once he got traded to Dallas, it didn't immediately take. Nash wouldn't average double digits in scoring until nearly his 5th year in the league. But once things started clicking, the lights could not have been brighter. The point guard of the early 2000s was a 2-time All-Star who had just appeared in the NBA Conference Finals by 2003. At the turn of the century, the man wasn't even averaging 10 points a game. And in just 3 years, he's battling against Tim Duncan and the Spurs to get a chance at a championship. After 6 years in Dallas, Nash was shipped back to Phoenix. In his first year back in the Valley, Steve won his first MVP. In a highly contested award run against Shaq, Steve snatched it after averaging basically 16 points, 12 assists, and reinventing the game as we knew it. The 7 seconds or less Suns were a breathtaking example of what ball movement and speed could really do to a typical defense. Nash led a team ahead of its time all the way to the conference finals. But again, he ran into Tim Duncan and the Spurs. Which leads me to the first big comparison that I want to point out between Nash and Iverson. Steve never made it to the NBA Finals. Every time it seemed like it might be his year, he was thwarted in the conference finals by dominant big men like Duncan, Shaq, or his old teammate Dirk. Meanwhile, Iverson did see the finals as we mentioned earlier, but that was his single chance. In fact, it was his single chance at even the conference finals. AI saw one deep playoff run and was otherwise lost in a sea of first and second exits. His time with both Philly and Denver accumulated to 30-point average seasons and one playoff run. Here's the biggest theme that I think is clear though when looking at these two legendary guards. It all comes down to what you want in the backcourt: scoring or playmaking. Because we have the extreme ends of both here. To put this into perspective, the highest field goal attempt average Nash had in a season was 13. The only time Iverson shot that little was in his final NBA season at 34 years old. AI was a shot taker through and through. He averaged 23 shots a game and made plenty of them to rack up points. He retired 4 years before Nash did, but still had almost 7,000 more career points than Steve. The flip side is Nash basically doubles Bubba's assist total. Both players saw the game in completely different ways, and yet both ended up at the same point on top of the league with an MVP, while also unable to get over the hump of a championship. Since those days of battling on the court, both players have looked back and reflected on playing against each other. When asked about Nash, Iverson explained, "Steve was just a headache because he could do it all." And likewise, when Nash was asked about AI, he said this: "It was awesome playing against Allen. Great competitor. Played our whole careers against each other. The toughest thing about Allen was he gets to the foul line. He got to the line and that broke your back so many times." So now, I want to turn to you. What do you think about these two when you look back at both at the same time? Did you enjoy watching one of their playstyles more than the other? We certainly know who had more actual style on the court. Do you feel like both deserved a ring? Personally, I think it's always tough to see an MVP not get his championship trophy. I'm sure for the player, it's brutal to get that type of praise, but still get shut down in the playoffs. And here's an interesting one. Make sure you at least have a comment about this one. Do you feel like there's a pair of young guards you see this same kind of dynamic developing? Where's our young Nash and young Iverson? A few names come to mind potentially, but I'll leave it up to you guys. And as always, thanks for watching Comparing History, and I'll catch you in the next one.